Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of The Snake Pit. I'm your host, Son of Bat, and tonight I'll be talking about 8mm, and to a lesser extent, 8mm 2. Released in 1999, 8mm is an American crime thriller film. Well, I consider it more of a horror film, but crime thriller also fits pretty well. Directed by Joel Schumacher and written by Andrew Kevin Walker. Now, if that name sounds familiar to you guys out there, it's because Andrew Kevin Walker was also a writer for Brain Scan, which coincidentally is a movie I reviewed a couple days ago. I thought that'd be a funny little fact to throw in there because it kind of blew my mind when I found out he had a hand in writing this. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, you should. Joel Schumacher is a very, very talented director. He's done some of my favorite movies, such as The Lost Boys, Flatliner, Falling Down, this one here, 8mm, The Number 23, Blood Creek, Batman Forever, Batman and Robin. No, I'm just fucking around about those last two. They fucking suck. But other than that, he's a really good director, and I highly recommend you look into his work because he's definitely not one to miss out on. Before I dive into what this movie is about, I guess I'm going to dive into what it's like, where it takes its inspiration from pretty much, because that in itself is very interesting. This movie centers around snuff films. Now, for those of you who don't know, a lot of mainstream people consider snuff films to be an urban legend or a myth. Now, I grew up in the early to mid 2000s. I had access to the internet, so I know better. I'm pretty sure Live Leak, Gore Grish, Necro Babes, all that stuff can count as snuff because at the end of the day, it's basically just death caught on film. But I feel like all these weasels try to find a loophole and say, no, it has to be death on film in a pornographic loop. But I don't believe it has to be porn to be counted as a snuff film. Like shit, even evidence photos can be considered snuff photography. So it's a very blurred line. It's a very controversial topic. A lot of people tend to pretend like it doesn't exist. And I think the reason why is because if it does come out that this is true and that there's a ring of buyers, sellers, producers, and creators for snuff, then that could really hurt the entertainment industry, more specifically the pornography industry, because pornography is a whole can of worms in and of itself, from drugs to fucking non-consent to underage performers. If snuff gets added into that ring as confirmed truth, then I feel like that would be the final nail in the coffin and the shit would shut down. And a lot of people, I mean, rightfully so, would lose their jobs and go to fucking prison. But that's why I personally feel like the mainstream tries to say that snuff doesn't exist to basically save the asses of a bunch of people making the money. But anyway, the first time the word snuff film showed up in the public consciousness, to my knowledge at least, was in 1969 or 1970 with Ed Saunders' book The Family. Family, of course, being from Charles Manson's family, who murdered Sharon Tate and all those rich yuppie fucks in 1969. Now, the book states that at some point during the writing, someone approached Saunders and told him he had film reels, like Manson home movie film reels that may have also had death footage on them. He, of course, didn't pay to look at them or even view them because he believed they were stolen from an evidence locker. This again shows up as a similar thing in the Son of Sam Ultimate Evil case, which was made into a book by Maury Terry. And he basically asserted that at least one or maybe a couple of the Son of Sam murders were set up and staged as snuff films for rich perverts who wanted to see it. And it went back to Roy Radin, who was a Hollywood producer, and it was just a huge fucking crazy mess that I definitely recommend you look into. Either read the book, check out the documentary, whatever you can. It is really interesting subject matter. There's obviously a couple I'm probably missing out on, but then there's Fred and Rose West, and then Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. And then that's not even accounting for all the really fucked up shit that goes up on the dark web and on the internet, like the digital videos. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting subject. And like I said, I find it really interesting that the general public would rather pretend like this doesn't exist at all, when it definitely fucking does. But yeah, that's my little history on snuff films. Like I said, if there's anything I left out, like any crucial things in the timeline of history of this phenomenon, please feel free to leave a comment down below. But yeah, now I'm going to dive into the movie. I just want to give a spoiler warning because I personally do really enjoy this movie. I think this is a really good, underrated one. And it would be a shame if you watch this review and it spoiled anything and you didn't see it. So, you know the drill. Pause the video, come back to it later, and until then, let's dive into it. So like I was saying earlier, 8mm is a 1999 horror film directed by Joel Schumacher and written by Andrew Kevin Walker. Produced by Gavin Polone, Judy Hoffland, and Joel Schumacher. Starring Nicolas Cage, Joaquin Phoenix, James Gandolfini, Peter Stormare, and Anthony Held. Cinematography by Robert Elswit. Edited by Mark Stevens. Music by Michael Dana. Production company Columbia Pictures. And distributed by Sony Pictures. Released on February 26, 1999 in the United States and April 1st, 1999 in Germany. I bring this up because the movie is actually a co-production between the United States and Germany, and it was made on a budget of $40 million with a box office return of $96.6 million. Now, it definitely made more than double on its return, and it was actually number one at the box office for a short time, but critics absolutely fucking hated this movie, and I mean, like, big surprise there, but audience reception was also lukewarm. Like, a lot of people didn't really like this movie when it came out either, which, in the 20 years since its release, it's been reevaluated as a classic, like, horror thriller, and it's got cult status, which is always good. So people are starting to come around on it, which is always nice. And, honestly, it always surprised me Sony was the people who distributed this, and Columbia were the ones who produced it, because every time a movie about snuff comes out, it's always like a low-budget exploitation film. Like, big studios do not want to touch this subject matter, and it's pretty fucking crazy that, like I said, a big studio and a big director were on board and they made this, because it really lends to the movie being watchable and not just a piece of exploitation, but like a really good story. Speaking of the story, let's dive into the plot here. Basically, the plot's about this private investigator, Tom Wells, who's contacted by an attorney, Daniel Longdale, who's the attorney for a widow, Miss Christian. And basically, when Mr. Christian died, the attorney and the wife went through his personal belongings, and they found a safe that they had to have pried open. And inside the safe, there was like cash, stocks, bonds, like all that kind of rich asshole shit. But the thing that got everyone's attention was this 8mm film reel. And they watched it, and apparently the film reel depicts a young drugged girl who is eventually stabbed to death. Now, the reason why they call the private investigator is because the widow wants the assurance that this film is fake, and she wants to know that the girl is alive. And she's willing to spare no expense to make sure that this all gets confirmed. So this results in Nicolas Cage traveling to multiple places, trying to put the pieces together to figure out who the girl is, who the pornographers are, and ultimately if she's still alive. The first place he ends up looking is in the missing persons files. Now, he's trying to basically find a face to match the one in the video, and he eventually comes across it. There's this girl named Marianne Matthews who went missing in North Carolina. He ends up going all the way out there to talk to the mom and, kind of piece together how she disappeared. He comes to the conclusion through testimony and evidence that she basically ran away like, some, not most, but some kids do. And he even finds a diary that has an entry stating that she went to Hollywood to become an actress. So he then goes from North Carolina to Hollywood. While he's in Hollywood, he meets a guy played by Joaquin Phoenix named Max California who works in a porno shop. And I swear to God, one of the funniest intros to a character in a movie. I swear the first line he says, he looks Nick Cage and like dead in the eyes and goes, "Can I interest you in buying a battery-operated vagina?" And it was fucking hilarious. Like this guy, like their chemistry in this movie was amazing. Joaquin Phoenix and Nicolas Cage are both great actors. The way they kind of bounced off each other was really cool. It was great having them as two main leads. Joel Schumacher really knew what he was fucking doing when he casted this movie. Just great pick all around. So Nick basically gets Joaquin Phoenix's character on the payroll, and the reason why is because he works in a porn shop. He knows the ins outs. He knows who comes and buys. He knows the suppliers, and he basically is like, "Look, I'll give you $500 if you show me how deep the rabbit hole goes, and we fucking try to figure out if this is real and if there's a market and all that stuff." What ends up happening is they end up diving into the deep underbelly of the world of fetish pornography. Now, this starts with them going into a Mexican brothel, and in the back of the brothel, there's a guy selling videotapes, and he's saying that they range from like bondage to torture to bestiality. Once Nick Cage starts inquiring about snuff, the guy flips out, pulls a gun on him, and they both get kicked out. They then go to this underground video flea market fucking thing that's filled with what Joaquin Phoenix refers to as the porn zombies. And this shit's fucked, bro. They're like underground in the tunnels, and it's people literally selling like the shit I mentioned earlier, but now kitty pictures have been put into the mix. Rape tapes have been put into the mix. So Nick Cage, well, he's looking around trying to find, like something that can compare to the film reel he has to maybe find the production company. He goes to the guy selling the rape tapes, and he's like, the guy's telling him it's the most extreme shit in the flea market, and he's like, "Do you have snuff?" To which the guy gets pissed the fuck off and tells him that doesn't exist. This is as hardcore as it gets. Then they end up going to like a sex dungeon club with like a bunch of leather freaks everywhere. And apparently the guy running this place has a snuff tape. They end up buying it for $1,200. They go back and they watch it to see if it's made by like the same people or anything. And it happens to be filmed in the Philippines, and it's a girl basically getting Eiffel Towered and the shit kicked out of her and then choked to death. And then the next segment in the video is a girl strung up, getting Eiffel Towered, and then getting beaten to death with like a stick. But then Nick Cage pauses it and he goes, look, it's the same girl in both segments. And then they come to the conclusion that the tape is fake. And basically they have no leads at this point. So what happens is Nick Cage ends up looking around to find more about the girl. He ends up going to, I think, you call it a convent or something, wherever kids go that the church sets up so they're not on the streets. He goes to one of these things and he talks to a nun who remembers the girl Marianne, and he gives Nick Cage a suitcase that she left that she never came back for. And in the suitcase there's more journal entries, but specifically a number to a talent agency. This talent agency is ran by a guy named Eddie Poole, and he's played by James Gandolfini. Fucking another amazing casting choice. This guy like played this scumbag so fucking perfectly. But Nick Cage shows up, he starts inquiring, and he shows fucking Eddie Poole a picture of the girl. Now we as the audience can see from the look on James Gandolfini's face, he knows who this fucking girl is. Because there's this really long pause where he looks like he's about to shit a brick, and you're like, oh, you totally know who it is. And not satisfied with the answers he's given, he basically bugs Eddie Poole's office and sets up shop in the apartment building across the way, spying on him. And at some point, he ends up calling Eddie Poole, like being an anonymous call, and tells him, look, I know what you did to the girl. You killed her, yada, yada, yada. This freaks him the fuck out. So he in turn makes a call to somebody else, who we assume is the other person involved in this video. And we later find out this is another pornographer named Dino Velvet, who specializes in bondage, torture, violence pornography, right? And essentially Max is like, oh yeah, I know who this guy is. And he has a guy who has a connect to him. So they end up going out to New York where this Dino Velvet guy is. Now the thing about Dino is the only way they can get to him is they have to hit him with a business proposition with a lot of money, or else he ain't going to talk to nobody. He's a really recluse, hard to find guy. So they basically kind of dangle a carrot in front of Dino and say, look, we'll give you 10 grand to commission a torture film, but the caveat is we need that guy, the animal in the mask machine, to be in the movie. Fuck, totally skipped over this. I forgot to mention, while they're skimming through all these Dino Velvet tapes, Nick Cage finds that one of the torturers in one of these bondage movies is the dude from the Snuff film, this hulking dude in a leather mask with a pentagram star tattoo on his hand. So he goes to Dino, like I said, and he's like, look, I want to make this fucking bondage movie with a white chick and a black chick, but I need that machine guy in it. Dino accepts, and so far Max and fucking Tom think that they're gonna figure this whole thing out. But before they go and figure it out, Tom makes it very clear to Max, like, look, you've been a great help to me. Take this cut of the cash and go back to LA, because he fears shit's about to get hairy real quick. And his gut was right, because once he goes to the filming of this bondage movie, he finds a trap has been set for him. Eddie Poole's there waiting, Dino Velvet's there with a crossbow, and Machine's standing there waiting to fucking stab somebody. Then they drag out Max, who's been bound and gagged, and they put him up on a type of crucifix, aiming the crossbow at him and shit. And they're like, look, if you don't get that fucking film you have and bring it back here and destroy it, we're going to kill him, we're going to fuck him, and we're going to film it. And then we're going to do the same thing to your family. But wait, spoiler alert of all spoiler alerts, another figure shows up into the equation. Who is it? Daniel fucking Longdale, the rich man's fucking lawyer. And basically, he tells Nick Cage, look, I didn't expect you to get this far. This was supposed to be a goose case to keep the old lady entertained. You weren't supposed to find all this shit out. He leads him to the car to go get the tape, where fucking Nick finally breaks down, and he asks him, like, why, man? Like, why the fuck did you do this? Why did Mr. Christian do this? Why did he want a tape of a little girl being murdered? To which Daniel coldly replies, because he could, and he had the money to. He wanted to, and he did it. And shit's fucking wild, because yeah, that's how a lot of these people think, man. They think just because, like, these Epstein types, like, oh, I got the money, I can do whatever the fuck I want. Well, like, eventually it comes to the light, and Nick Cage is fucking fuming. He comes back with the 8mm tape. It's then burned and destroyed, and he's like, look, you destroyed it, now let Max go. Dino is like, yeah, okay. And then Machine walks up and slits his fucking throat and kills him. Then an argument ensues, because Nick Cage mentions how much money was put into making the movie. He's like, is this what it was all worth? $1 million fucking dollars? Yeah, $1 million, that's what your souls are worth type of rant. To which all the pornographers are looking around at each other like, $1 million? What are you fucking talking about? We only got 50. And they're like, what's he talking about? Then they all find out the lawyer has basically been pocketing a mass cut of the fucking movie. Everyone fucking draws guns, fucking Texas standoff style and shit. Fucking Machine's standing there salivating with a knife in his hand. And basically Daniel tries to back out of it, pulls this little bitch pistol on them and threatens to shoot. And then fucking he's like, look, fucking Eddie, put your gun down and slide it over. He thinks he's in the clear, but nah, Dino shoots him in the throat with a fucking crossbow. But then Daniel shoots off one round of the bitch pistol, hits fucking Dino in the throat. And yeah, two of them are dead. Eddie Poole's shitting himself, sweating everywhere, and Machine's about to fucking go loose because the final order he's been given is to kill everybody in the fucking parking lot. Nick Cage does some finessery, loads one round in the gun, shoots the fucking handcuff, stabs Machine, beats the living shit out of James Gandolfini and barely gets away. And basically, after this ambush, like, everything is pretty much fucked. He doesn't know what to do. So in a panic, he calls Mrs. Christian and he tells her, look, the whole tape is real. They paid $1 million to kill this girl. She is dead. Fucking no surprise, Mrs. Christian is distraught and she's like, I see. Well, come to the house at 8 and I'll give you further instructions. Basically, he's trying to convince her to go to the cops, but once he gets to the estate, he's told that she committed suicide after finding out that her husband was a piece of shit, and she left 2 envelopes, one for the Matthews family and one for Nick Cage, which contained the rest of his payment and a note saying, try to forget us. This results in Nick Cage warning his wife about what's been going on. They have to go hide at a place that only he knows because he's scared that his wife and baby are going to get put in the snuff ring too. But eventually this all culminates in Nick Cage deciding to take out the other 2 fuckers. He goes back to Hollywood. He tracks down James Gandolfini, brings him to the house where the girl was murdered, basically gets a confession out of him, ties him up, beats the shit out of him, and then tries to shoot him. Goes outside because he can't, calls Marianne's mom, and he basically wants confirmation that the mom loved her kid and that she wants these men dead because he'll do it. She basically confirms that she loved her daughter. Nick Cage goes in and pistol whips the living shit out of James Gandolfini, killing him. Then he goes to New York to find Machine. He calls a bunch of hospitals pretending to be a cop, reporting about a suspect being brought in with an abdominal injury. Finally gets confirmation to who he's looking for, which tracks him to this old dilapidated house by a cemetery where an old woman lives and this unsuspecting, fat, bespectacled guy lives. He puts together that this guy is Machine, and then the night when the mom's not home, he goes in and he plans to shoot the fucker. A huge fight breaks out where they almost kill both of each other. They fall from a fucking roof and they land in the cemetery. But right before the final blows are delivered, the guy's explaining why he did it. And he tells him, look, man, I was never abused. I was never raped or anything like that. I just do this because I fucking like it. And he's like a total psycho, which is pretty frightening shit. And then Nick Cage fucking kills him and then returns home to his fucking wife where he breaks down in front of her trying to process like all the fuck shit he's been seeing over the last few weeks. Then a few months later, he receives a letter from Mrs. Matthews thanking him for actually giving a fuck and looking for her daughter, saying that she feels that only her and him were the only 2 people who ever gave a shit. The movie ends. This movie nails you to the back of your fucking seat, and it will not let you go until the end. It is dark, it's gritty, it's disturbing, it's fucked up, it's creepy, just nihilistic, and honestly rots and festers and lingers in your brain for a few days after you watch it. Like, you will not forget this movie. It is just so twisted, and it's cool because like I said, I'm surprised Sony distributed this movie and Joel Schumacher directed it, because usually when the topic of snuff gets brought up in movies, you either get a faux snuff film like American Guinea Pig, or you get a really low budget exploitation film like Last House on Dead End Street. And now I don't mean to diss those movies, because I fucking love those movies. They're great as their own thing. It's just that I feel like this didn't have to rely on extreme gore, torture, or like cruelty or anything to get its point across. Like, there was fucked up shit in it, but it didn't go far and beyond. You know what I mean? Like, it told a really good story and it relied on the story as opposed to like, oh, check this out. You know what I mean? Which is cool. It's always good to see a movie that can be disturbing but palatable, because I find it hard to recommend some movies like August Underground and shit like that to people because, they're not ready for it or they don't want to see something like that. This is something that toes the line but is definitely watchable. So big points for that. Apparently it could have been a lot worse. This movie originally had an NC-17 rating. Now, I couldn't find for sure exactly what got cut, but the things that are pretty much coming up like multiple times are there was a couple sex things that were cut out. There's a conversation between Nicolas Cage and Joaquin Phoenix where in the background, I guess on the TVs, there's like a bunch of hardcore pornography playing, so that whole scene got cut out. There's a scene in the underground tunnels where the porn zombies are, where there's like a room and a bunch of these freaks are watching like a BDSM film on a fucking reel. And it's like some latex nurse with huge tits cramming an enema in this guy's ass. Apparently, some of those scenes were trimmed to make it less hardcore, but like, fuck, man, like shit was pretty nuts. The scene where James Gandolfini gets the living shit kicked out of him was cut down too, because apparently that was a lot more bloody and brutal. And this scene where Machine slits Joaquin Phoenix's throat was also cut down. But I mean, those are just minor cuts that don't alter the movie in any way. And like, I honestly, like, even if they were there, I don't think it really would have changed the movie at all. So it's not a cut that I'm really willing to bitch about, which is kind of a first, because I usually hate when cuts happen in horror movies. But you know, this was one case where it's actually not that bad. Originally, David Fincher was actually supposed to direct this movie too, which based off the color palettes and the tone and the style of this movie, I could totally see him pulling this off. You know, I believe one of the guys who worked on Seven was also one of the people who worked on this, and it just lends to that feel of like mid to late 90s true crime fucked up thriller movies. And I feel this is on the level with Seven. I'm going to say it. I feel like this is on the level with Seven. It's not a bad fucking movie. Originally, Russell Crowe was supposed to have the main part, and it was going to be a, quote, dirty, handheld, gritty thriller. So I guess it would have been like a found footage movie. But then the studio told him, you can either do the low-budget movie with Russell Crowe as a handheld, or you can do it with a much bigger budget with Nick Cage. So then he opted to use Nick Cage, which I'm kind of glad he did. I mean, a lot of people needlessly shit on found footage movies. There's a good handful of them that I don't mind, but I think, like, I don't know if this would have worked totally as a found footage. I feel like it would have fallen into the realm of other exploitation faux snuff films if they did that. So I'm kind of glad they went the other way with the bigger budget and everything. But still, you know, interesting idea that they could have, you know, picked up on. Apparently, the movie was so fucking dark. The film production also was in a shit fit about it. So they asked Andrew Kevin Walker to lighten the tone of it. And Joel Schumacher also felt that this would be needed. So he actually made some changes. And apparently this resulted in a huge fucking spat between Andrew Kevin Walker and Joel Schumacher. And Andrew didn't want any part to do with the movie. And he basically kind of did what the director of American History X did. And he fucking left and tried to wash his hands from it, which kind of sucks because I think as it all came together, I mean, it wasn't a light movie at all. It was really fucking dark. I don't know like how much more dark it could have fucking been, but like it was still pretty dark, man. And you know, even Joel Schumacher, 2 decades after it came out, he still said he was proud of this movie, which is great because like I said, I don't feel like enough people talk about this movie. It actually took me a long time to find a DVD copy, like almost like 2.5 years. Like, I could have bought it online, but me personally, I like the thrill of the hunt when I go into video stores. I like finding stuff just there in the bin, and this was one of those ones where, you know, fucking thrift stores, video stores, everywhere I went, no one seemed to have it. And then I happened to luck out, and I found this double feature, and yeah, no, it's a very good movie that I recommend more people check out because Nick Cage is always fucking great, Joel Schumacher's always great, and it's a movie about snuff films. There's not really that many movies that take a serious approach to the subject matter, so there's a lot of good things about it. A movie that this is actually really similar to is Hardcore from 1979, which stars George C. Scott, and it's a very similar plot about he's a private detective, or he hires a private detective to track down his daughter after she runs away and sees her, and he ends up seeing her in an 8mm porno movie, and then it gets really close to a snuff thing toward the end. Really good movie. I highly recommend y'all check out. And also there's a story called The Cutting Room by Louise Welsh, which is about an estate auctioneer who finds snuff photographs amongst the client's porn collection and basically sets up a private investigator to see if the girl was actually killed. So this has been based off original things before, but it's still, like, I don't consider it a remake or an adaptation because, like I said, I believe snuff is a true thing. I believe this is just one story of a much larger fucking phenomenon. So I don't mind that Hardcore and this are very similar, or that there's a short story very similar, because all three do their own thing and they're all really good, and I recommend you check them out. But Two other things I found really interesting about this movie was Max California was originally supposed to be played by Mark Wahlberg, but he turned down the role. And also Bruce Willis was supposed to have Nick Cage's role, but he turned it down. And I believe also Val Kilmer, Charlie Sheen, John Travolta, Mel Gibson, and Nick Nolte were also considered for the leading role, but nothing ever came of it. William Friedkin and Paul Verhoeven were also considered to direct the movie, which I fucking love The Exorcist and Bug, so I think Friedkin would have done a really good job with this movie. It would have been definitely really different. Same with the Fincher one. Paul Verhoeven, I mean, I do like Hollow Man and I do like RoboCop, but I don't know if he could have handled this one. Maybe he could have. I don't know, but I think I would have just gone with Friedkin or Fincher or fucking what we got with Schumacher, but that's just me. But yeah, no, really good movie. There are some moments in it that I like. I don't want to give this a perfect rating. I'm probably going to give this about a 9 or about an 8.5 to a 9. The only reason why I'd say that is because there's some inconsistencies with the movie that kind of take you out sometimes. Like, they're not major or anything, but they kind of like just, I don't know, like Dino Velvet, the guy who played him was a really great actor. But if you've seen Bad Boys 2, he's pretty much the same guy he was in Bad Boys 2, but instead of an ecstasy dealing club owner, he's a fucking pornographer. And he's a good actor. He's pretty fucking funny in a really twisted way, but like that dark comedy-ish behavior kind of came out toward his death scene, and it kind of made it a little cheesy. Like after he gets shot in the throat, he's like, I wasn't supposed to go out like this. It was supposed to be artistic. And it's like, it's just kind of goofy. Like there's a couple moments like that kind of take me out. And you know what? Actually, I'll give this a 9 because the thing I was thinking about was there was music in it that was really weird. It kind of felt like Middle Eastern or African music showing up when like Nick Cage is cruising through the red light district. And even when I watched this with my girlfriend, she said the music was kind of a weird choice. But then I thought about it today, and I'm like, you know what? It kind of makes sense. Like they're going through, like I don't know how to explain it. It just fit the more I thought about it. So yeah, I'm gonna give this movie a 9. There are a couple moments where it shows that it's not like the perfect movie it could be. Like there's a couple like drops in performance here and there, but it's nothing major. Like it's still a great movie. I highly recommend you check it out because it's not a movie to miss in my opinion. It's just great. It's a really good one. So yeah, that's a 9 across the board. But yeah, fucking 8mm, amazing movie. If you can find a DVD, buy that shit as soon as you can because it's a hard one to find too. But yeah, now we're hitting the 27-minute mark. I'm gonna keep this brief because I don't believe this is a legit sequel to 8mm. It is a soft-core porno thriller film that is an 8mm sequel in name only. Originally, it was supposed to be called The Velvet Side of Hell, but when Sony picked up the rights, they were going to retitle it 8mm 2 to cash in off the success of the first movie. There's little to no connection with that first movie, and this is just some direct-to-video shit. Now, I don't mean to straight up diss all direct-to-video movies because there are a handful of them I really do fuck with and enjoy, but when you get a major movie like 8mm with major directors and star power behind it, and then the sequel immediately goes to direct-to-video, that's a huge red flag, and 99.9% times, that sequel is going to be dog shit, and this one fucking is. I'm going to give a brief rundown of this whole thing and who made it. So 8mm 2 is a 2005 direct-video thriller film directed by J.S. Cardone, screenplay by Robert Sullivan, story by Dylan Terrason, produced by Scott Ehrenbinder and Carol Cottonbrook, starring Jonathan Schiach, Laurie Huring, Julie Benz, and Valentin Pleka, cinematography by Darko Suvak, edited by Elena Margarini, music by Tim Jones, distributed by Sony Pictures, and released on November 22nd, 2005. So this movie has no connection to the first, like I said. It has nothing to do with snuff films, and the only connection it really has is you kind of get to see the dark underworld of sex clubs and porn and shit, but like it's nowhere near as extreme as the first movie. It's basically about this rich couple, Trish and David. David happens to be counsel to Trish's father, who's an ambassador that doesn't approve of their relationship. But anyway, Trish and David go to Budapest, and while they're there, they start experimenting in the sexual underworld. They end up getting into a threesome with this model named Risa. And essentially, like the whole crux of this movie revolves around blackmail photos of the threesome, which a few things. The first thing is 8mm 1 pretty much paints the porno scene and the sexual underworld as a really seedy, dark, twisted place. Like, you feel like you need to take a shower at the end of that movie. Whereas the sequel, they don't lend into the gross dirtiness. They try to make a fucking hypersexualized erotic movie. Now, originally, like I said, this was The Velvet Side of Hell. This ain't an 8mm movie. So if it was called that and this was marketed as an erotic thriller, would have made sense. Slapping 8mm 2 on this, especially right after I watched the first one, it really was a fucking bizarre watch, because I went from like really gross, degenerate, you feel like a bag of shit, to like, hey, yo, isn't this fucking hot? And it was just, it was weird. And the other thing I didn't get was like, they're blackmailing these people with photos of a threesome between 2 adult women and an adult man. Like, where the fuck's the blackmail here? There's nothing that's really that bad. The only person I can see getting pissed about this is Trish's dad. Like, other than that, there's nothing that's career ending necessarily here. It's not like man was pulling an Anthony Weiner and soliciting dick pics to fucking people voting for him. He literally just got a fucking hooker with his wife. Like, you know what I mean? Worse things have happened. So, like, there's a lot of shit here that just didn't really... it didn't really make me care for these people. It didn't have any stakes to it. It wasn't like disturbing, and it wasn't scary. It was just like, it was just kind of fucking dumb. Like, basically they're getting like these ransom demands, or else the photos are going to get released. And then the only thing that really made me think about 8mm in this movie is when they end up catching David, they have him tied up to a chair in like a gimp suit with like a fucking oxygen mask feeding limited air to him, which, it lends into the sadomasochistic fucked up nature of the first movie. But it was just, this movie was all over the place. I fucking couldn't wait for it to end. Like, I absolutely could not stand this movie. And I think a lot of it might have to do with the fact that I watched the first one and then I went right into 2, and I was like, I was just let down, man. Like, I didn't know what to expect. I didn't expect it to be good as part 1, but this was just a softcore porno, man. Like, this was nothing to do with 8mm, and it was just a shit movie. The only reason why I'm giving this like a 1 and not a complete 0 is it contains full fucking nudity and graphic sex, but it depends on which version you watch. Now, I own the rated version, but I felt like watching the unrated version, so I just streamed it. And yeah, basically the unrated version has like pussy close-ups, like masturbating and fucking eating box and shit like that, like a bunch of like unsimulated sex acts and an unsimulated porno shoot. That gives it the 1 point. Other than that, this movie is a bag of dog shit. Avoid this at all costs. If you fucking see it, just don't get it. If you're, a degenerate and you want to watch a Skinamax flick at like 4 a.m, I guess you could watch this, but there's real no value to it. I don't know why it was made. I mean, I do know why. Sony was greedy, and they, even though they didn't like 8mm 1, they still fucking wanted to bank off it with a second one. But like, really a shame that the sequel couldn't have taken a more like disturbing path, or couldn't have actually been like a good movie. Like, I don't expect it to be like the first one, but like, I was expecting like, some of the similar shit, but on a lower budget. But this movie was just so out of left field and so fucking weird that it like legitimately pissed me off. So I'm going to give this a 1. Don't recommend it. Yeah, but part 1 though, solid 9 across the board. If you find that, check it out. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. It was a long one to get through, and now I am going to rip some fucking bowls. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.